Yeah.
Who might be the greatest winner?
Yeah, I mean, look, budgets, I suppose, at a level do have winners and losers, but I'd like to think that what we were doing was making sure that overall New Zealand is winning. I think that the squeezed middle, the Prime Minister has talked about, have been a real loser in this budget. I just think they've been heaped with more costs and taxes, more borrowing they'll have to end up paying for, and there's not really anything in it for them. I think one positive thing, you've asked me about, some positive things for the midwives. I support what's happened there. It's about 100-something million that's gone in there, and that's a group that hasn't had a pay rise for a while, and they're well deserving of that additional remuneration and support.
Now, what does this budget mean to the Chinese community?
Look, I think for the Chinese community, what we know is they've come to New Zealand for great lifestyle, but also for business opportunities. And I don't think there is anything in this budget that really is good for business. I think we've seen declining business confidence. I don't think there's anything in this budget that will turn that around. I think what we require from a government as New Zealanders, whether Chinese, Māori, Pākehā, is a plan, a cohesive plan around the economy. And what we saw was a government that can divide up the pie, and we can all have arguments about that. I've made clear what I think, but doesn't know how to grow it. And I think Chinese community will be worried about that.
The Prime Minister says there was no contingency money in the budget for the pay rises to nurses, teachers and police. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what she means. The reality is governments make their priorities. A government that's blessed with very good economy, very strong books. They're spending money on whether it's diplomats, $1 billion there, whether it's Shane Jones Fund, whether it's student fees. They've got money, and so ultimately it comes down to what they prioritise, and obviously they haven't thought that's a priority in this budget.
Teachers particularly have been disappointed by what was in the budget in education. Again, what are your thoughts on that?
Look, I think it's a very surprising budget because people would have expected, given the rhetoric, that this government would be putting a lot more into health and education. They just haven't. And so I can well understand in both health and education the disappointment in the sector.
Did the government then get people's hopes too high, do you think, about this budget?
Look, I think what you've had here is a government that, in opposition, thought it was Santa Claus. It made many claims it was going to solve a lot of things in health and education. It's got in, and that hasn't been where its priority in this budget is, in my view. Yep, there's been money there, but actually they've put many billions into other things, diplomats, free fees, winter energy payment and the like, and that means there'll be disappointed people in the health and education sector.
And just lastly, the government has to build new homes under Kiwi Build, more classrooms, hospitals and state homes. Is this possible? And will the construction sector be able to cope?
I don't think this government understands infrastructure very well. I don't think ultimately it knows what it's doing there. And we've seen that with Kiwi Build, where they were promising 100,000 houses. Now we know, look, even their own officials of Treasury and other departments saying there's no way they're going to be able to do that. And I think that's a real come down for them. Kiwi Build was a really big policy for the government, but they're just not going to meet the targets that they've set.
So in your speech, you mentioned this as well, that National spent more money on health and labour, but you've included the pay settlement in that equation. That's not, but you can't, it's two separate things though, because the national health budget is different.
I don't think they are separate things. Ultimately, that's wages that go into health. And were this government to do a pay equity round, and they put that as a specific fiscal risk, they would do it through the same pool of funding, if you like. That's where the midwife money that is being done has been. And so it is comparing apples with apples. I think ultimately, we can get caught up on is it less, is it more? My real point is simply this. The government set really high expectations before the election, actually just in the last few months, about what they were going to do in health and education. They haven't met it. Broadly speaking, what they've done has been pretty similar to us. And that will mean that there's a sector out there in health, but also in education that will be, I think, very disappointing.
Does that mean health and education would have been disappointed in a national government?
No, not necessarily, because I can't say, to be honest with you, exactly what we would have done. I think what is true is if you look at the several $billion across diplomats, provincial growth fund, free fees for students, a bunch of other targeted things, we wouldn't have spent so much in those areas. That would have given us other options. And let's be honest, they're hard discussions to have. I'm not trying to suggest to you that they are easy ones to solve. But I think what's true is we would have easily been doing around the levels they're doing, and then there'd be the argument about whether they're doing more. As I said in the speech, to say to you now, I think what is surprising here is that this government, with all of their rhetoric before the election and post it, didn't do a lot more. By the way, that does mean, and we're starting to work this out as we really get into the detail of the budget, there's a bunch of things that just aren't funded the way they promised. And that's whether it's mental health that isn't getting 100 million. And now they would say that's because of an inquiry, but that's still a real issue, very significant election issue that isn't getting the funding that it requires, or that it would have got from us, or a bunch of other issues as well.
It's your role to be critical of the government, but it's also to come up with other ideas. What would you have done with that money that you say is poorly spent? And what would you do about things like the housing crisis, where you say Kiwi Build is a bad idea?
Well, I think ultimately, if you look at the housing, apples for apples, all of the things we were doing, whether it's special housing areas, whether it's the Crown Infrastructure Partnership, whether it was KiwiSaver Home Start grants, a raft of initiatives, they were working and they were making a difference. We've continued with those. Look, we'd have to continue looking for other answers. Directly to your question, I think the reality is this. I no longer have armies of officials. I'm in opposition. I don't have, as I said in the speech, many luxuries. One I do have, though, is taking time to think through these chunky issues. But I think what I can say to you is I wouldn't be spending a lot of the money in all of the areas that we've trotted through. We would try to have a much more targeted social investment approach. By the way, if we did that, I think that would free up room to ensure we were really doing a strong job in health and education, and also potentially to do more around growing the economy, which I think was a woefully lacking area in this budget.
Now, the Māori budget's only half the amount they get. What kind of messages they send to Māori voters?
Look, I think the Māori voters will draw a conclusion that actually their 13 members of Parliament in Labour didn't kind of get enough. I think what you've got here is no money for whānau ora. You've got a halving of the vote Maori budget.